Hello. I'm ready. Are you ready? Okay. Here I go. We are here with you now, eager to visit. It is nice to have an opportunity to co-create in this way. Have you been thinking about what you want from this conversation? What you want to contribute in terms of your perspective? What you want to receive in terms of your asking and your ability to allow your reception of it? Proximity is an important thing to understand, isn't it? You understand it in terms of what you are capable of seeing with your eyes, with what you call your naked eye. How far can you see, and with how much detail can you see? How far can you hear? What's the distance? But even beyond the physics of your time and space, which helps you to measure and understand and calibrate distance and space and motion forward and really all expansion or all evolution. There is also this vibrational proximity. That's the kind of tuning proximity. In other words, you can't set your radio dial on 101 FM or AM and listen to something that's being broadcast on something on another number or even another frequency. Those frequencies have to match up, don't they? And so when we focus on you, we know that there's a lot going on in your world, in your personal world, in your collective world, in your ever-changing world, in you ever-changing in your ever-changing world. So your proximity to ideas, which are thoughts, which are vibrations, your proximity to everything is always in flux, isn't it? So how do you find your way? How do you keep from losing your mind? Well, humans, in a real desire to have some stability or some security, you want to hold to what is. We understand that. But in the process of that, sometimes you limit your ability. You hinder your proximity to things that you want. In other words, sometimes you have a desire for something that is outside your available proximity. And by that we mean your beliefs don't support your new desire. Your beliefs are too far vibrationally apart from your desire. But if your desire, which is tended by your inner being, if your desire is an upper half of the emotional scale desire, in other words, you want it for all of those good feeling reasons, that desire will win out. So then the question becomes, how long is it going to take you to find the vibrational equivalency, or the vibrational harmony, or the vibrational atmosphere, the vibrational proximity to your desires? When you awaken after having dreamed during your sleep, and sometimes you say, I know I dreamed, I just cannot remember what it was about. And then, as your morning unfolds, you remember a little piece of it. you catch a little piece of the tail of that dream. And as you focus there, having accomplished that proximity, often then more and more of what you dreamed will unfold. You will vibrationally tap in to the frequency of it, and you will have the experience that you call recollection. We don't call it recollection or memory. We call it vibrational proximity. You got within the range of it and you picked up the signal. So we'll be talking about some of that today. So many of you wrote so many things from so many perspectives, but there is definitely a theme that is coming from so many of you who are students of this work. And the theme, in very general terms, we can sum up in a few sentences. It goes like this. Abraham, I've been doing this for a while. I feel better and better and better. A lot of conversation like that. In fact, many say, I feel the best I've ever felt, but there are still things that I desire that I can't see unfolding yet. But the theme is something like, I want to understand this because there are these specific things that I am not yet experiencing in terms of manifestation. And what we want to say to you, if you were one who submitted that or someone who is having that experience, if you will take this conversation that we will have today about vibrational proximity, you may very well come away from this conversation today with some new clarity about why some things you want seem out of reach, and why some things you don't want are so within reach that you can't get rid of them. You want them to go away. Unwanted things won't go, and wanted things won't come. Why is that? And the answer, we know you heard it from us many times, but maybe we can flesh it out with a little more explanation that will help you to understand it as we move through this pile of wonderful conversation. Basically, what we are going to have conversations about today is that if your quest for security and stability is stronger than your appreciation for your expansion and adventure, then you may be one who clings to beliefs because of the comfort of the stability, a little insecure to go to a new place. Now, why would that be? Well, that's because through what you want to call the trial and error, there isn't any error ever of your life experience, you did try some things that didn't turn out well for you. You jumped too soon, or you leaped too far, or you trusted too much, or the way that you want to say it. But we want to say to you, none of that applies to your new understanding, because your new understanding is one of maintaining your vibrational alignment with who you really are, to your own inner being, those being one and the same thing when we say them that way. Who you really are is the combination of the non-physical you and the physical you. But who you really are from the non-physical standpoint is always pure positive energy. That inner being you never pushes against anything. But that physical you often does. Because you, in a very flawed premise sort of way, have come to believe that you can push away from you the things that you do not want. While that is never true. Because whatever you give your attention to, you call to you. And so most of the conversation that we want to have with you today about proximity has to do with your ability to focus. But even more, it has to do with your willingness to care about how you feel as you focus. And so in very blunt terms, you could say, we're going to say, that it has to do with your deliberate thought or you're thinking by default. They're different. They're opposing those two concepts. Deliberate thought or thinking by default. Deliberate thought means you're deliberately choosing a thought because you care of its vibrational proximity to the things that you want. And even more important and easier, you care about how you feel. Most humans are we love you so much, sloppy thinkers. And by that we mean you think about what's around you. You think about what's loudest. You think, most of you, we love you so much, but you do this thing that does not serve you. You are defensive in your stance. Oh, even in a conversation with anyone, even in a conversation with someone you love very much, very often as they begin to speak things that put you on edge, you feel defensive because you're not wanting to be dragged in to a further and further conversation that is uncomfortable to you. That defensive stance does not serve you. And it stems from a premise that isn't accurate. Your defensive stance stems from a flawed premise. And that flawed premise is, I don't create my own reality. That flawed premise is, the law of attraction isn't real or doesn't exist or doesn't work for me. But the biggest flawed premise of all is, I am not deserving of the good that I want to flow into my experience. Another flawed premise, there's only so much good to go around, and only the goodest of the good are worthy of getting it. Nothing could be further from the way this universe is set up. There is plenty to go around. In fact, it expands exponentially, completely commensurate with the desires that you produce. Another flawed premise is that in my defensive stance, I must defend against unwanted things. And the biggest flaw in that premise is a misunderstanding that it is only attraction, 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 attraction. No one else is doing anything to you. No one else is keeping anything else from you. But your defensive stance is a big part as you interact with the world around you of why or how you shoot your own self in your own foot, how you deprive yourself of wanted things as you feel unnecessarily competitive. There is no competition. Unnecessarily deprived. You're the only one who can deprive yourself. Unnecessarily not understood when your inner being understands you at all times. Everything unwanted is because of misunderstandings that you've gathered up along your physical trail that most others support in your collective belief of not enoughness, of not enough worthiness, not enough ability or right to receive, not enough of something. So, as we move through what you were asking about today, we'll point out to you your defensiveness and the futility in it. Every time you want to say, someone makes me feel defensive, we would say, every time you feel defensive. You want to say, every time I'm made to feel defensive. And the reason you put it in those terms while we put it in the other terms is because you feel like they made you feel that way because you didn't feel that way before they did whatever they did. But that defensive stance is, friends, we really want you to hear it. It is the predominant attitude that you perpetuate because you're not paying attention that gives you the most trouble in your life experience. Because every time you defend against something, guess what your point of attraction is? Since there's no exclusion, since there's no pushing away, there's only calling to you what you give your attention to. Every time you feel defensive, you're just asking for more. So, as you are in relationships, so many of you wrote letters, more than ever before in this offering of this broadcast. And your words were something like this: I am with the most wonderful partner, wonderful in these ways and these ways and these ways. But. And many of those ended in, I think I just want to leave. I think I just want to run away. I think I want to end this relationship of 15 years or 20 years or however long. I want to run away. And we want you to understand that that attitude of feeling like you want to run away is really about wanting to run toward freedom of non-resistance. You want to run away from knee-jerk responses of defensiveness. You want to run away from opinionated people who suck up all the air in the room. You want to run away from misguided people who spew their misfacts, their lack of true evidence. And we want to say to you, friends, you're not ever going to sort that out. You don't get to decide what is right or wrong for anyone else, what is true or false for anyone else. You're just calibrating to your own inner being, who will help you to feel your proximity to the perspectives that throughout all of your existence you've been creating. Before we get into this, and we're going to go soon here, we want to call your attention to these very important platforms of understanding. You are more than you see in this physical body. You came into this body as an extension of non-physical energy, of non-physical source energy. We refer to that non-physical source energy part of you as your inner being. Your inner being. That non-physical part of you is aware of you in every moment of your consciousness. That inner being part of you is this long-term you. That's the part of you who is completely immersed and hooked in to source energy, who is love, not hate, who is clarity, not confusion, who is passionate about life, about your life. You can tell your proximity to that non-physical part of you, of which you will always be a part. You cannot separate yourself from that. You can know your proximity to that vibrational frequency by the emotions that you feel. We have, in our observation of you as source energy, watching extensions of source energy, we have witnessed you and we have understood you. We continually understand you. And we have presented to you an emotional scale guidance, an emotional guidance scale with 22 stops along the way, all the way from full immersion or absolute perfection in proximity to your inner being. That's up at number 1. It feels like love and appreciation and all that good feeling stuff. All the way to further and further and further away proximity at the bottom half of the emotional guidance scale. Fear, insecurity, and some of everything else in between. There is a point on this emotional guidance scale where the way you feel moves from tension to ease, from feeling good to feeling bad. And the degrees of it get better and better as you move upward on the scale and feel worse and worse as you move downward on the scale. And so we just want to get that into the conversation early because we'll be referring to it. We're going to refer to it right now. Your emotional guidance scale has a tipping point that it would be ever so helpful for you to become acquainted with. You can tell when you tip from discord into accord, from disharmony into harmony. You can feel the proximity of you allowing the fullness of who you are. When we say to you, when you allow yourself to be who you really are, we mean upper half of the scale, good feeling being. That's who your inner being always is. So we're going to thank you in advance for your insight, for your questions, for those you wrote in, for those that are in this pile, for those that are in another pile that we are going to refer to, that we will not read specifically, and to the unspoken ones, and to the new things that you are contributing, even as we've been visiting here in this brief 20-minute opening. Longer than usual, covered a lot of ground already. Here we go. Hi, Abraham. I would love to gain a better understanding of why my dog barks when he does. My brother and nephew have moved into my house, and my dog barks every time they arrive home, even though they've been living here for months. I appreciate him letting me know when people are outside the house, but when I ask him to stop, and I never yell, he continues to want to bark. I'm not sure why. I'd really love a better understanding of the language that my dog, there's your answer right there in your question, that your dog has some things to say. Your dog has some things to say. Your dog wants to communicate. Your dog observes you all communicating with each other. And your dog has some things your dog wants to say. If we were standing in your physical, now you want to know, well, what does my dog have to say? Your dog's conversation is not as complicated as yours. Your dog's conversation, all the beasts of your planet, the conversation of every beast of your planet. Term of endearment there, that word beast, is an emotional conversation. A conversation that shows surprise, a conversation that shows alarm on occasion, a conversation that is wanting to communicate, appreciation. So, in order for you to get closer in proximity to the vibrational conversation of your dog, approach it from the standpoint of emotion rather than thought. Now, you can't separate one from another, and certainly your dog does think. But the beasts of your planet, it would serve you all to do it too, speak more of an emotional language. Can you see how? Start again. Anytime, start again. When you are in a space by yourself, in your human, more complicated, meaning more interested, meaning more attracting of experiences, perspective, you have access to thoughts that surround. Esther used to comment, as some years ago, when she and Jerry were working together, going from city to city, doing most everything between the two of them that Abraham Hicks publications involved or required. Esther was calling the cities, setting up the hotel rooms for the meetings. And she commented often when she would hang up, I can feel the energy of that city coming to me through the telephone line. She could feel the difference in one city from another. She and Jerry talked about it quite a bit. Part of it had to do with her perception or her perspective of the city. Much of it had to do with the person that she had encountered on the phone and what was going on in their world. But it is a certain thing that people who live in a certain city have come to be more like one another than they are like people who live in other cities. So we don't want to get too far off the track in this conversation, but there's a lot of really good things to think about there. The beasts of your planet are not as far-reaching in their thought. They're not contemplating what's going on very far outside of their immediate vicinity. But they are very sensitive to the energy that is present in their vicinity. So let's say the dog has been home alone, and you come home. Now, because this dog has aligned with your energy over time, that doesn't necessarily need to be true, but in this case it is. There is neither surprise in your energy. Maybe you're a more even-keeled person. Maybe you are welcoming and eager to see the dog. Maybe you like this dog. In other words, but every person who enters the space, the dog space or your space, changes the content of the surrounding energy. And so the dog is very often acknowledging nothing more than his emotional response to the energy of the room. Most of you do not like change very much. Most humans are so adaptive to change that you let just about anything and everything call you or calibrate you away from your source calibration. The beasts of your planet, especially those in the wild, your domesticated beasts sometimes begin to act a bit more like you. But the beasts of your planet are not easily called away from their emotional state of being. So we could talk for the entire time about this subject and this subject only. We're not going to. But for a little while, there were so many dog and cat stories especially that you sent this week. For a little while, take this conversation, bring it to an active place in your mind. And each time that you are interacting with one of your furry friends, project this question outward, a question that you are looking for an answer for. What is the emotion that you are expressing to me now? And see if you can put your dog somewhere on the emotional scale. We're going to do it for you here now. Brother and nephew. They're two different people. If they come one at a time, it's a little different response. Your dog receives nephew. On the emotional scale. We're feeling it. Discouraged. Discouragement. Your brother. Blame. They're pretty close together. If you're in the house, resentment. Now, these are not 100% of the time. These are just normal proximities. You want to have some fun, get out ahead of it. Establish your vibrational frequency. Make some lists of positive aspects about anyone who's about to enter your home. Lay a warm blanket of well-being around your environment. And watch the difference in the way your dog communicates. Everyone's going to want to get a dog as your emotional feedback meter. You have something even better than that already built into your own self. Which desires end up in the vortex? If they're only the good ones, how are they selected? In exactly the way that we just described. Your life experience causes you to launch them. And because your inner being has already prepared the vibrational atmosphere of the vortex, when you launch the rocket, it is welcomed and received and understood and nurtured forevermore. Next one. How do I keep from wanting to avoid friends and family because of grudges I'm holding regarding how they've treated me in the past? Now, isn't that an interesting conversation to begin in light of the conversation that we've just been having? You want to avoid them because of grudges that you're holding. Now, that's logical, isn't it? But what are you going to do about it? Avoid them forever? Holding a grudge means I'm holding myself on the lower half of the emotional scale, and we want to appeal to your logic. Why would you do that? Now, you want to say, and you're not wrong, well, they did this and I reacted, and they did this and I reacted, and they did this and I reacted. And we want to say, they reacted, you reacted, they reacted, you reacted, they reacted, you reacted, they reacted, you reacted. This is the basis of your experience. But where in all of that reacting to each other and to that wanting to run screaming into the woods and wanting to avoid them, or wanting to be like the dog and just bark at them? In other words, let's just comment on what's going on here vibrationally or emotionally. And so the word grudge is the telling word here. You want to get out ahead of it. We hope that you liked the conversation that we began with here today. We hope that you are getting a sense of the platform that we are wanting to help you establish for yourself. Because here's the biggest flawed premise of them all. We have your attention. You do not feel appreciation for the differences that surround you. You, talking to all of you, really, do not fully appreciate the diversity and what it means to you personally. And the reason you don't is because you haven't figured out how to be so connected, so calibrated to the love and clarity of your source, of who you really are. So you keep being surprised and have knee-jerk responses to the others in your life, who then you resent because at deep levels you understand you are supposed to feel good, and when you don't, you want to give the credit or the blame to the other. There's no way out of this quagmire, friends, until you are willing to accept that your differences are good, not bad. That their opinions, while they are not your own, must be allowed to exist in a righteous place in this world too. This is not a containment where pretty soon the capacity of thoughts is going to expand so much that there will be no room for your new thoughts. That's never going to happen. There doesn't need to be a lid on what people believe and think, and what they believe and think does not need to be any negative concern of yours. This conversation today is really going to be a lot about your knee-jerk response to differences and your mistaken, flawed premise belief that you've got to get rid of the thoughts that they think to make room for the thoughts that you think. Think about the last very opinionated conversation you had with someone, where you just wanted to strangle them because they were so strong in their opinions, because their opinions differed from yours. And what we want you to understand is that your problem was in your misunderstanding that there's room for all of them. and that your proximity to them is about what you're doing with your thoughts before you walk into the room with them. You have so much to offer one another, even in your differences. The magnificence of your inventions and of your evolution and expansion is about the way you all fit together. And until you accept the vastness of your differences and not just accept them but embrace them, not just put up with them but adore them, you're going to be a miserable person in this life where there is so much more thought going on than the thought that you think that you want to think. You're not going to ever be able to eliminate the thought on this planet. Every thought that has ever been thought exists. And the reason that you stand here now on the leading edge of thought, thinking and evolving and expressing and living, being alive, is because of all of the thoughts that have come before. They are your friends, not your enemies. But you get to, softly, deliberately, with precision, choose your point of focus. Your defensive stance is your own biggest enemy. Because when you get in that defensive stance, you hold yourself apart. You mess with your own proximity to everything that you hold dear to you, to everything that you want. Doesn't matter why you're ornery. It doesn't matter what you're resistant about. Resistance is resistance. You get into that stance, you shut yourself down from all that is good. Doesn't matter what your excuse, how valid it is for the negative emotion you feel. You're depriving yourself of the goodness and the well-being that you deserve and that you want. And the thing that is so interesting to notice is that the more often you as an individual, or the more collectively you push against one another, the more you deprive yourselves individually and therefore collectively of things that you want, which perpetuates, for most unknowing about this business of inclusion and how there is no exclusion, which means for most, you just hold yourself further and further from the things you want. One letter that's in this pile, someone put it so perfectly, using the word, it was an interesting turn of phrase. I've cut myself into a corner. I avoided that, so I cut myself a little more, and I cut myself, meaning I cut off from that, and I cut off from that. And now I'm in a corner with nowhere to go. No way out of the corner, is how the person was describing it as feeling. And we thought that was such an interesting and accurate way of putting it, because the more you look around this world and define what you don't want and 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 what you don't want, every time you do that, you launch a rocket of what you do want, and your inner being takes hold of it, and the universe provides an avenue to it. But the more you're pushing against, the more you're pushing against, the more you're cutting yourself off from everything that you're creating. And that is what so many of you are experiencing. You are expanding and then limiting the expansion, and expanding and then limiting the expansion. You are strangling yourself and blaming everyone else. You got to get hold of the way this universe works. You have to embrace your understanding of your own emotions. You have to open to the breath and the life and the air and the freedom and the joyousness that is yours to be had. You have to calibrate to that. This week, Esther had a few rough moments as decisions that have been made by the cruise line for an upcoming cruise. The cruise line put some requirements in place, and those who are cruising, including Esther, must abide by them, or they will not be welcomed. Esther thought about it in terms of, she watches the players at the basketball game. She's got some wonderful seats right down front. She can often see that line, and she can see when they step out of bounds. Sometimes the referee doesn't see it, but when he does, he calls it. because that's the rule of the game. If you're going to play in this game, these are the requirements to play in this game. So everyone who plays knows what the rules are and chooses to participate or not. So many things are like that. Now, of course, you have the freedom to participate or not. Esther yells at the ref every now and again. She wants him to see what he didn't see when it favors her team, and she wants him to not see what he did see when it favors her team. In other words, everyone has your reasons that you want what you want. But so it was a little uncomfortable because of the Facebook comments. Angry people coming into full attack, not just of the cruise lines, but of Esther and her wanting to hold a cruise. So at first, Esther felt defensive. What would they have me do? When the pandemic appeared in a tangible enough form, there were many cruises already in the offering and millions of dollars being held for future cruises. Not Esther's money, not Life Journey's money, not celebrities' money. Your money, clients' money. High percentage of these people want a cruise, want to leave their money right there, want a cruise, really, really want a cruise. So Esther is thinking, what would they have me do? Just say to everyone that wants to go on the cruise, or every basketball player that wants to step over the line, or everyone who wants to fly and wants to bring their gun along, or everyone who wants to drive 200 miles an hour. Esther's one of those. She wants to get in a hot little car that has the ability to be anywhere she wants it to be, and she wants to use her driving skills. Of course, she would like that. She knows she won't run over anyone. She knows she won't crash into you. But she also wants to drive on the road, and she knows that in order to drive on the road, there are some requirements. Now, there are those who are arguing in their mind and out loud, throwing things with every word that we are speaking here, but the point that we're making, we're not talking about right decisions or wrong decisions. We're not talking about it being right that someone get a vaccination or it being wrong that someone be required to get a vaccination. What we're talking about is everyone, 100% of the thinkers on this planet have the right and the ability to make choices. And you are all day long, every day, making choices of the vibrational proximity that you are choosing to this and that. We are not wanting to hold up a list of the choices that you should make. We're wanting to show you, in as vivid form as we can, the way you can bring your choices into your reality. We know for sure that if you can get past the feeling, the belief that you have to please everyone, friends, can you do both of these things at the same time? Can you go on the cruise and not go on the cruise at the same time? Choose. All right, I've chosen, I want to go. Well, in this case, at this time, in this particular setting, there is a requirement that has been established by a lot of people who have considered from a lot of perspectives that the vaccination is required. Now, your point of attraction has evolved, hasn't it? Do I want to go on the cruise or I do not want to go on the cruise? Choose. I choose to go. Now a new set of criteria. A vaccination is required. I choose not the vaccination. It's a choice. What people are upset about is, by choosing not to have the vaccination, now they're being told that they have also chosen not to take the cruise. And they want to argue, no, I'm just choosing not to have the vaccination. I'm not choosing not to have the cruise. And this is when we say, this is when you have to go inward and say, I'm choosing not the vaccination, and therefore the cruise is eliminated from me at this time, like the basketball player who doesn't want to keep the rules of that game, and on and on and on and on and on. We know. But you have not chosen not to have a good life by not taking the cruise. You have not chosen never to have fun. You've not chosen to deprive yourself of the plentiful variety of choices that you still have that do not include you being required to do something that you don't want to do. This is the thing that we so want everyone to soothe themselves by understanding. When one avenue feels like it's closed off to you, better said, when you close off an avenue with one of your choices, other avenues will open, because the universe is always vying for your joy, for your pleasure, for your love of life. The option for joy will never peter out. Esther's first thought was, I want to be able to open all of the doors for all of the people. And that just is not possible. And we said to Esther, they have to open their own doors. And they each have inner beings who are standing there with the doors wide open. And anyone who attacks anyone with the flawed premise that someone else is preventing me from something I want has no proximity to a happy life, because all around you are those who were born to choose differently than you are choosing. So what we're really talking about here is the path of least resistance, which is the same thing as talking about the path of most allowance. The path of most allowance of what? The path of most allowance of the most of what you want, being laid out for you every step of the way for you. And you know how you know when you are slowing down the path of most allowance or not allowing yourself to step on the path of most allowance? When you feel angry or defensive. Esther got her feelings hurt. But it was only up to Esther to do something about it. And she certainly would not ask anyone to ever do something because they cared more about the way she feels than because they care more about the way they feel. She's come too far and knows too much about all of that. So when your feelings are hurt, when you have fear of missing out, when you feel that someone else is taking away your freedom or depriving you of something that you want, until you understand that all of that pain is self-inflicted, even Esther's pain at reading the Facebook responses was her self-inflicted pain because she did not have to read that. And when she did, she didn't have to think about it further. Because she knows the number one complaint in a meeting room is it's too hot, and the number two complaint in the meeting room is it's too cold, and it's the same meeting room, and she cannot please everyone. You have to be willing to take some of your clothes off and put some of your clothes on to make yourself comfortable in the environment in which you are focused. and your environment includes far more than one puny, piddly little offering of one event that Abraham Hicks Publication is offering, certainly it deprives no one of the joyful life that they want to live. How do I keep from wanting to avoid friends and family because of grudges? That was a big one for Esther. She did not want to put people who were really angry at her in a box where she is now angry at them. That's the ending of life for Esther. To have reason to pinch herself off from the well-being that is dominantly a part of her experience. She refuses to do that. Oh, that's pretty selfish. Esther, you are so selfish that you are not willing to push back against someone that is pushing back. No good ever comes from that, does it? And so, they're annoying everybody's around you all the time. There's so much to be irritated about and worried about, so many things to push against for a minute. That's step one. But with every opportunity that you have for something like that, you clarify for your inner being and for the universe at large about what you choose and what you want. You make the world bigger. You cause an expansion. There's no lid on it. You make room for more of what you want. And then it's your job to find vibrational proximity to what you want. People want to argue. Well, Abraham, Esther may not be demanding that I go on the cruise, but isn't our government demanding? Is it? Are any demands being made? Or is it just an option that you can participate in or not? What most people are defensive of is the debate, the conversation. Debate is such an interesting word. Let's talk about it. A debate. I've got my perspective and you've got yours. Let's talk about it. What's the reason for this debate? To expand our capacity to know? To expand our capacity to learn? Or are we debating in defensive stance? That's the big question on the platter of your world today. Are you debating for expansion and more? Or are you debating because you must be right and they must be wrong? If you can sort those two simple approaches to life out, I'm debating because nothing more delicious than to get to talk to somebody who sees something differently than you do. Because there might be something in their point of view that might enhance your point of view. But if you get defensive right away, and then the debate becomes one of argument and pushing against, to the point that you have lifelong grudges, to the point that you have to avoid, and then you have to faction off in little groups. And the hardest part of that is the people who come to your group who are in harmony with you about this point, what if they're not in harmony with you on another point? Isn't that a brain twister? That surprised Esther. She thought that when she got a strong feeling of calling, and she knew it was coming from her connection to her inner being, she thought that others would want to make the same decisions, as if her relationship with her inner being is the dominant relationship in all of the world. Everyone has a relationship with their inner being, and everyone is being guided to the path of most allowance, or could be called the path of least resistance, by your respective inner beings. You've come here to get along in your differences, to expand because of your differences. So the biggest flawed premise in all of this world is that you must separate into your corners in order to protect your right to be different. And we say, you got a powerful law of attraction that is more powerful than every other law of physics or every other law of religion or every other secular law. Every law that you think is a law, the law of attraction, is the law that is dominant in all cases. And the law of attraction will bring to you, quickly in most cases, what you're giving your attention to. Oh, how blessed are you that you get to choose, that you have the free will to focus. Our work, friends, has been mostly about helping you to define your choices. You're getting what you're thinking about with no exceptions. But so many are not getting what they want because you're not thinking about what you want. You're pushing against what you don't want or pushing against someone else for some reason. But when it catches on with you that you get what you think about and that you have the free will to think about whatever you choose to think about, and you can tell by the way you feel what kind of leverage of attraction you've got going on, then you come to understand that you will never be deprived of anything. There is no law of deprivation. I worry that my government will deprive me of things, or that my parents will disallow something, or that I will displease my lover by wanting something different than my lover wants. And we say, you can't get to where you want to be by gravitating or calibrating to the desires of others. It is our desire for you that you come to know something that we know so powerfully. And that is, there is not now, and there never will be, an agency, an organization, a group of beings of any nature who will ever have the power to overpower your point of attraction. Since no one can think for you, and there is only one agency or entity or consortium who thinks with you, and that is source energy, always vying for the goodness that you have identified, there is no risk to you. And the evidence that you pick up along your physical trail, that you then promote as real stuff to scare other people so they will push against too, is all bogus. You get what you believe, you get what you expect. And you have so much opportunity to mold what you think about into what you want, so that what you expect and what you want are in close proximity to one another. This is a good time for a segment of refreshment.